Hey guys, welcome back to BellaVet. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Hancock, and we thought we would continue this new grad mentorship series by talking about client communication. And I think it's something that is not always very easily defined, and it's something that we don't really have a specific class about to learn from. So I thought we'd chat about it a bit today. And so Dr. Hancock, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I'm excited to be here. I love talking about client communication.
Thanks.
And I do agree, it's frustrating at Mizzou we don't have a dedicated course yet. Hopefully someday in the future, because it is a vital skill, but just not right now. So a bit about me. I graduated from vet school in 2011 from Iowa State, and I've been at Mizzou ever since. I trained as a clinical pathologist, which seems a little strange as someone who really loves client communication, but I promise it's just as important for clinical pathologists or anyone to be able to communicate as we collaborate. And then I also completed a PhD here in Mizzou in the College of Education. So I just have these varied interests, and I think it kind of comes from my story a little bit. So being a veterinarian wasn't my first kind of career choice. This was a second career for me. I decided in my early 20s, I wanted to be a vet. I owned a house, and I thought, I want to give back to my community. And it was giving back to my community and making a difference in those ways that made me really connect with this idea of going to veterinary school and being a veterinarian and making that my career. And so that's what I did. And my connection to client communication started there. So I needed to get hours, as we all do when we're trying to go to vet school, lots of hours. And being kind of a second career for me, I had to work and go to school full time to be able to continue to pay my mortgage and just like live, right? And working at an emergency/general practice in a pretty big metropolitan city, you see a lot of varied things, and you have a lot of angry people sometimes. And when I would work at the front desk or when I would work triage, I came to realize that I wasn't connecting with folks, and I wanted to do better because it really mattered, because I wanted to be an advocate for the pet and be an advocate for these owners, but I was missing a connection. And so there was a series of cassette tapes, if it doesn't date me too much, that I listened to in my commute. So it's a big metropolitan area. I commuted about 30 to 40 minutes one way, and so I listened to how to deal with difficult client behaviors. And I became quite skilled. In fact, they wanted to put me up at the front desk more often, and it really came down to kind of listening reflectively and being empathetic. Like, that's all that it took. I was blown away by that. So I've carried that little nugget with me since. So.
Cool. Well, awesome. So we can get started on the questions that we wanted to cover today. And all right, so our first question is, why is client communication important in the first place? So
that is such a good question, because I think it falls by the wayside, thus we don't have a class in it, right? But I'm going to quote in a paraphrased way a graduate that graduated maybe 3 years ago. We were just chatting about a lot of things, and what he had said was that it doesn't really matter what you know or what you can do or what cool surgical skill you just learned. If you can't communicate how important that is to the client, or you can't engage with a person, that doesn't matter, because there's someone at the other end of the leash, or there's someone who brought this patient in on a trailer that you have to get on board. And being relationship centered is the focus of that. So communication as a skill is really kind of the hub of a wheel when it comes to clinical practice. And research really shows us that a lot of kind of legal issues and when it comes from doctor-client relationships stem from a lot of miscommunications. It increases client compliance, which is way better for the pet. It improves outcomes for pets. It also correlates with greater revenues. So all of those things also, as a practitioner, relate to you having a better quality of life. So it gets back to wellness. So it's really an all-encompassing thing, but that, in a nutshell, is why we need to talk about, or at least do some training or deliberate practice in client communication.
Awesome. Cool. I think that's a good place to get started. So our next question is, now I know why it's important, but what qualities make a good communicator?
There are a lot of qualities that make a good communicator, and it really will depend on the client you're working with. But so the biggest thing to kind of zoom back out is being relationship centered and valuing the relationship at the core of your medical practice. That's a huge thing. I mean, I could name off a couple like discrete skills. Like I talked about some in listening to my cassette tapes, like reflective listening or being empathic, those types of things. But really at the core of a lot of this is being relationship focused and relationship centered. Is probably at the heart of what good communication is.
Okay, awesome. Cool. So now we know kind of what things are important if you want to be a good communicator, but also, you know, I'm sure as new grads, we're all going to learn a lot in our first year and that we're going to make some mistakes and it's inevitable. And so I guess what common mistakes do you see people making with communication and maybe how can we possibly avoid those?
Yeah, so these are all great questions. It's exciting to talk about them. And when I think of common pitfalls, it kind of gets back to that notion of what is good communication and really being relationship centered and relationship focused. So not meeting people where they are, right? So not everyone, I think when we graduate vet school, we've been using doctor words for a long time. We've really been immersed in a rich learning environment. And it's a really isolated space. It's not bad, it's just isolated, and recognizing that and kind of traversing back into the real world is pretty tough for folks sometimes. So being really cognizant of the words we're using, the phrasing we're using, our body language and our posture, those nonverbal communication kind of strategies, those are really, really important. And I think a bit of advice I always offer for folks is to think about when you go home for whatever big family meal you celebrate with your family, and your grandma or an aunt or someone like that is at the table, what words might you use with them? Think about it in those ways, because those are the folks that you're probably meeting with, unless they're also a physician. Then that's different.
I think it's tricky,
That's totally different. So that's one of the big ones. I think that another common pitfall really stems from this idea that it's something folks think is like this, you have it or you don't. Like I'm either a good communicator or I'm not. And it's actually a skill that we can develop and hone and practice and become better at. Now naturally, we, like any skill, we all start at different places, but it's definitely something that we can work on and develop and become better at. So I think like that's a really important place to come from, and it's almost a mindset around communication. I think something from like an education standpoint is leaving it to just like how you described, like we're just gonna learn as we go, and leaving it to just whatever happens informally is a common pitfall that we make as educators. It doesn't mean that you may not pick up some good stuff. I bet you're gonna pick up some good stuff, and I bet you all are gonna pick up some good stuff. But really being deliberate and how we teach and build skills is a common pitfall we make as educators as well.
And I definitely note and notice when, you know, some professors who are very good that, you know, when they just skate through the day, and then other professors who are my favorites that are like, what did we learn from that experience? And I do wish we had more of that, and it's cool to start seeing more of that too. And so I thought we would start off our next question a bit more specifically with an example of, you know, something that a lot of people wonder is, you know, veterinary medicine can be an emotional place, and the question is, you know, is it okay to cry in front of clients? You know, very sad things happen sometimes, and I knew personally one of my very first emergency case when I started clinics was just this really cute dog, and it had a disease that just progressed and it just couldn't beat it, and we ended up having to euthanize, and that was a really sad moment, and it was my first case that didn't make it that I got really attached to, and I thought I was this person who like didn't cry, and then I got in there and I was seeing this client, you know, get emotional, and I felt emotional for them, and I was able to hold it till the very end, but I couldn't speak, I couldn't do anything, and so I guess I'd like to know your opinion on like what to do in those moments and when it's okay, and maybe when people think it's not okay or things like that.
So the big question, can I be human?
Right.
I think, I mean, in short, sure you can cry. And I think that when is it okay to cry? That answer is really complex. It depends, right? And I think you described not feeling sure, and oftentimes when we're thinking about crying as almost a nonverbal communication strategy, whether it's like strategy or not, like intentional or not, like because we can withhold our emotions, we can also share our emotions.
Yeah.
But it comes back to that relationship and the relationship that you have with that client, and I think that that's going to be your guide.
Yeah.
Really, and I think oftentimes in emergencies, we don't have the opportunity to develop that relationship that we may have otherwise had given a general practice situation or some other type of practice scenario. It's kind of, it's a very quick interaction, and oftentimes it's under the worst of circumstances that we wouldn't wish on anyone, and yet we just try to be there and be as humane as possible. I think what's really important about us as caregivers sharing our emotions with other people is to remember that we can be human and emotional, because emotions are natural and normal, and we can be competent at the same time. I think some folks don't see that as possible, and I want to trouble that a little bit, and suggest that it's absolutely possible. I mean, if we want to get really scientific about it, there's been research shown that when people lose their ability to process and kind of feel or understand emotions cognitively, they lose their ability to be rational at the same time. So we think of like emotions and reason as being these like separable entities that should stay separate, and that's not actually the case. That's not how neuroscience plays out. So I think that it's okay to cry. It's okay to be human. I think that understanding where those tears come from and what that emotion is for us, so that we may be able to share and connect authentically with other people, is what's probably the most important part about that. And that gets back to that relationship. And it's not just a relationship with the client. Now I'm talking also about a relationship with ourselves as healers and as human beings. So it's a lot. It's a pretty complex answer to a pretty complex thing. And so whenever that's the case, I always summarize and say, like, well, it depends.
No, I think that's a great answer, and it is very complex, and I know it's something that a lot of us worry about. So it's really good to have that, especially that, scientific backing behind it. I always like to have a little evidence in my back pocket as to why I feel the way I feel or do what I do. So thank you. And kind of our concluding question here is, what can we do to strengthen these communication skills?
Because there's skills we can strengthen. That's so awesome. How exciting. So the biggest thing we can do is to practice them, honestly, and to not just practice them because we're talking right now, but being deliberate in how we practice those things, and then reflecting on that practice. So kind of breaking down what we're doing and slowing down to think about how that went. What did I try there? Why did I try that? How did it work with this person? Why not? How might I do that differently next time? And that can be a really good thing to do one-on-one, but the most powerful feedback we have is to zoom outside of our body. So if there's a way to record yourself, that's really helpful, but then also asking a trusted colleague or a mentor to provide you some feedback, and to take that feedback seriously. Sometimes feedback feels extra personal, but when we ask for feedback, if we can ask for, hey, Rachel, I am working on my communication skills and I'm really having a hard time closing the conversation. You know me, I love to talk. So I'm going to try a couple new strategies with this client. Would you step in the room with me and maybe hold for this procedure and offer me some feedback on how I do closing the conversation? That would be like having a specific thing, like this is what I'm working on and this is what I want feedback on, can help the feedback giver really focus in on what it is you're trying to develop and those skills you're trying to improve on. Those kinds of things are really, really helpful. And then just like seeking opportunities to learn more and to engage more and build new skills, whether it's doing reading or engaging in workshops or taking a course, or I've heard folks talk about improv or doing like little things like that. Those can be really helpful. So there's lots of ways, but it is deliberate practice and being intentional on how we're doing it, not just kind of those out of whim things, which still happens every day. But if it's a skill we're wanting to build, practice deliberately.
Awesome. Cool. And as you know, my audience, it's directed at people before vet school, in vet school, and maybe even a little bit of people in practice. So I thought we could zoom in a little bit too, and maybe chat about like if you're in high school school or college, what are some maybe specific ways you can work on it? Like when I've talked a little bit about on my channel about my first mentor, and I said, I want to be a vet, what do I do? And she was like, go work in a soup kitchen. And I was like, okay. And it didn't, I didn't see the connection at first. And then she was like, talking to people, the animals can't talk, and talking to people is very important. And so my soup kitchen was retail. I worked in a t-shirt shop and in an artisanal jam shop, because yes, those exist in my hometown.
Sounds delicious.
Yes, it was a really fun summer actually. And so that's where I think I got a lot of my communication skills, working with customers. And yeah, so I guess what do you have to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely before veterinary school, customer service or working in customer service, any sort of service industry, can really be beneficial, because it breaks you outside of the veterinary world. And I think that it's important for us to realize that although there's a lot of things that are very special about veterinary medicine, there's a lot of things that aren't super special. And communication and client communication being relationship focused and being service oriented exists in a lot of other realms. And having exposure to different worlds is really, really helpful. So I love your soup kitchen example, or like artisanal jam. That makes me think like, ooh, I really want some toast now. But I think for myself, like I worked as a server in a diner in Des Moines for a number of years. That was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about customer service, right? Because my paycheck actually depended on how much money they gave me directly. Those kinds of things can be really beneficial. I think going back to that deliberate practice, if there are any opportunities that you see that feel slightly out of your comfort zone, not in the panic zone, but slightly out of your comfort zone, that would help you kind of be deliberate and intentional in building skill and practicing those skills, seek those and engage in those. Again, it's not to get into the panic mode, because then we're not learning. But if it feels like something that you want to stretch yourself by doing, definitely do that. So if it's a course, or maybe like it's something at the library in your hometown, or any sort of like what they call co-curricular activities, like a group or a club, or like and a zoo after dark, that's what they do here, event or something like that, go to that and stretch yourself and see what you can learn and how you can practice. And I think the one thing that anybody can practice in is being a deliberate communicator in their life across the board. So some days I think like, oh gosh, I'm in my head, and I think like, I want to connect with this person bagging my groceries, like and scanning my groceries. And so like connecting with that person and saying like, hey, how are you? Like making eye contact. This is not like I'm passing you by, like, how are you? Fine. It's like, no, how are you doing today? And like making eye contact and like being genuinely interested in how their day's going. Those kinds of things can be like focusing on the relationship of like, well, it's just transactional, but like I care about them as a human being too. Those can be really small ways to practice and sharpen your skills. Like asking an open-ended question is a good one to practice in random places. So I think for professionals, like veterinary students or professionals, there are a bit more opportunities for us to very specifically practice our client communication skills. So as a student, if your college doesn't have dedicated communication curriculum, like ours doesn't yet, although partnering with a couple of people, we're getting stuff going here. But seeking any opportunity you can to really sharpen those skills. I know sometimes clubs will do like speed networking events or other networking events, being deliberate in networking, because then those relationships can be really impactful outside of just a communication practice sense, right? You can make a really great mentoring partnership or something like that. So any sorts of club activities, courses, and then when you're out in practice, there are lots of opportunities to do communication. One workshop that is really, really great is offered at Colorado State. It's called the Frank Communication Workshop. I highly recommend that one. Colorado State has a lot of really fabulous things happening there, but there are more than just that. And if it's something you do want to build, then put your time and energy into it. And there are those opportunities out there. You just got to look for them. Because I think that, going back to thinking about, is it okay to cry? We don't think of professional skills as necessarily core to what it is to be a good doctor or be a competent doctor. And going back to troubling things, I want to trouble that a little bit because there are people that are connected to those patients, and those are the people that matter for compliance, for patient well-being, for good outcomes, revenue if we want to just talk about business. So that's what really matters. And if that's what really matters, then that's a core skill as well. Professional skills are core skills. So hopefully, I think there's a shift in the profession happening to where we are seeing them more as core skills. But in the meantime, I know there's lots of opportunities out there. It might just take a little more digging.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for all of this advice and information, and I know it's going to help a lot of people. And thank you so much for being on my channel. You're welcome back anytime.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was great.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you guys enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like, and please subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And yeah, so thank you again for being here, and we'll see you guys again next time. Bye.